question. Why are you a Prince fan?
Because Prince is bad, and I'm looking forward to seeing the movie. The movie's gonna be rough. I wish y'all go all see it tomorrow. Movie's tough. Have some fun. Bye-bye.
Welcome to the Movie Trap. My name is Russell Carlson, and with me, as always, are my good friends and bandmates. Not bitter, of course, would be Chris Boroff.
The password is what?
Oh, jeez. And joining me always, the real creative force behind the title of it, Zach Powers.
Sex shooter.
Welcome to the Movie Trap. On the Movie Trap, one of the three hosts that you just met picks a theme, and then each of us picks a movie based on that theme. Once we've watched all three movies, we then vote with an amount of points that we get at the beginning, plus some bonus points that we earn along the way. And whichever movie wins the vote, that host gets to pick the next theme, which you are getting ready to behold, because we are finally over with my, shall we say, slightly hobbled together theme of soundtracks that are better than the actual movie. Previously on the Movie Trap, I started with Judgment Night, which was something, and then Zach decided to trap me in birthday trauma of Batman Forever, and here we are today to wrap it up with Boroff's pick of 1984's Purple Rain. I don't think we'll get into the discussion once we get into that, but before we do, bit of business since we have some voting to do at the end of this episode here. As I said, we get some allocated points at the beginning, and then each of us get 3 bonus points to distribute amongst ourselves. Sorry about the grandfather clock. That we get distribute amongst ourselves as we see fit. So here's where we stand with the points. Chris Boroff, you have 1 more bonus point to give out, and you have 12 points for final voting. I have 1 more bonus point to give out with 10 points for final voting. And Zach Powers, you have 2 points to give out in bonus points and 13 points in final voting.
Okay.
So yeah, with that in mind, let's go ahead and get our puffy shirts on and our mascara and our lots of, I'm sure, Aquanet with 1984 rock movie classic, 1984's Purple Rain. Zach Powers, take it away.
Purple Rain is a 1984 musical-ish drama starring Prince. It is directed by Alfred Magnoli. It also stars Apollonia and Morris Day, among a few others. And it tells the story of the Kid, who is the front man for a band called The Revolution at a Minneapolis-based club, which also hosts a couple other house bands. The Kid, while fairly popular and successful at the club itself, has sort of a difficult home life. At home, his father is consistently abusive to his mother, constantly screaming and physically attacking her, as well as him on occasion. Meanwhile, at the club, he has a professional rival named Morris Day, one of the other leaders of the other house club bands, The Time, who has it out for the Kid. Morris is sort of a sleazy grifter type who spends his time throwing women into dumpsters with the help of his lackey Jerome. And before too long, there's other issues with both the band and the Kid's personal life. I may occasionally call the Kid Prince because, for all intents and purposes, it is. It's
you mean he doesn't
Prince.
just disappear into the role?
For some reason, he's the only person who's just not the same name. Although, hilariously, sometimes when I was watching it with subtitles, his dad was subtitled as male number 3, and his mom was subtitled as female number 2.
They're the only actual actors in the movie. It's hilarious.
Yeah. So regardless, they have this gig at this club with the 3 house bands. The other one, the Modernaires, barely come into focus at all, but they're there too. One conflict with the Revolution, of course, is that 2 of the female members of the band, Lisa and Wendy, played by people named Lisa and Wendy, have their own original songs that they want to perform, but the kid is having none of it. He won't listen to these songs. He won't entertain them. He doesn't care, and it's causing friction between his band, including causing Lisa and Wendy to occasionally not come to practice. At the same time, the kid meets Apollonia? Is that
Apollonia.
Apollonia. There we go.
There we go.
A young woman, new transplant to the Minneapolis scene, whom he takes on a sordid date on his motorcycle. They go to the lake, and she strips naked and jumps in, and he kind of acts like he's going to leave her for a minute, but then he doesn't leave her. It's a very sort of, yeah.
It's a deeply uncomfortable scene. I think we can just say that. It basically, it seems to be like she's out there on a job interview, and then he abruptly says you have to purify yourself in the waters of Lake Minnetonka, at which point she gets naked and jumps in, and it's handled like a funny joke.
He does say moments before she jumps in, no, like he tries to stop her before revealing it's not Lake Minnetonka. I don't know if they say what body of water it actually is, but I guess it's not like...
It's the land of 1,000 lakes. There's a lot of them about, man. You know.
I don't know if it's a particularly dirty lake. I don't feel like they established that.
It could just be a reservoir ditch. We don't know.
That's right. Yeah, right.
It looks like a fucking lake to me, man. It looks like a normal-ass lake. And then he acts like he's going to leave her behind, and then he doesn't, and they go home, and they fuck. Anyway, continuing on, Morris has a plan, right? He wants to get the Revolution kicked off the roster at the club. And his plan involves striking up a new girl group. And Apollonia is the target of this particular scheme. So he begins to approach her, both with the intention clearly of having sex with her, but also with the intention of creating this new girl group, the Apollonia 6, that will replace the Revolution at the club and cause hardship for Prince. And or the kid. It's worth noting that there are I'm doing this pretty loose. I watched this movie a few days ago, so blended together a little bit. And also, there's a number of sequences in this movie that are either, one, montages of him mostly driving around on his motorcycle, where they just play a full Prince song, and or two, like feature-length performances of them or one of the other bands on stage performing a song. So there might be some debate about this. I'd say 40% of this movie is just either a music video or concert footage. But yeah. Meanwhile, things are getting more difficult at home. His father is continuing to attack his mother, but at the same time, there's this weird draw he has to his father, who himself was at one time a musician. And at one point, he discovers his father playing piano, something he said he would never, ever do again. And he asks if he could see some of his compositions. He says, "I never wrote any of them down. They're all just in my head." But the relationship and home life there is clearly troubled. Meanwhile, things are getting more serious with Apollonia, but eventually, as Morris continues to pressure her and also do Abbott and Costello routines with his accomplice Jerome. She begins to move into the position of thinking, okay, I am actually going to start a band. After one night where she reveals the fact that she is considering taking up Morris's offer and starting a band, Prince slaps her in the same way his father often slaps his mother, causing, obviously, a rift between them. From there, Prince's home life continues to deteriorate, and he begins to listen to the soundtrack from Wendy and Lisa as a means of coping, and starts to discover he likes it. One night he saves Apollonia from Morris, who is... I don't know if it's accurate to say that he is sexually assaulting her. He's just kind of standing there gyrating, and he hits him with his motorcycle and then is like, get on. And she does. And they run off and presumably have sex again.
It was a deleted scene, as I understand it.
Oh, okay. But shortly thereafter, he returns home once again. He finds his mother down the street, once again having been physically abused. And when he returns home, his father, as he arrives and walks on the door, shoots himself in the head. Having dealt with that trauma, his father is taken away, not dead, but taken to a hospital, it seems, or at least that's the interpretation that I got, because he shows up in the final montage in a hospital bed. So he smashes a bunch of shit and then listens to the song Wendy and Lisa wrote for him, Purple Rain.
We have a title.
Yeah, indeed. So that's the title song. It's now to the point where the owner says, I've got 4 potential bands and I only need 3. So we're going to have a big night where you each perform and I'm going to decide who stays and who goes. So the big night comes. The kid is reeling from the attempted suicide of his father. The other bands play. The Time does a weird dance song. And it seems to go super well. And when it's the Revolution's time to arrive, despite all the tension between Wendy and Lisa, who have stood up rehearsals at this point because the kid won't play their songs, he says on stage that they're going to be playing Purple Rain. And so they play Purple Rain. It goes exceedingly well. The kid almost runs out of the venue, assuming it had gone terribly, but is pulled back and finds that everybody has rapturous praise for this new song. They do 2 more encores. He reunites with Apollonia. And sorry guys, I got a really bad cold, and I'm going at 30 right now. They do a couple more encores that even Morris seems to enjoy. There's some shots mixed into the encores of Apollonia and Prince at the father's bedside, so I guess he did survive. That's basically the movie. Sorry if this was a little bit of a looser one. It's been a couple days since I watched this. And also, it's plot light. A lot of it is music video and concert footage.
For sure. I think the easiest comparable is like Hard Day's Night.
Yeah.
Where there's like a very thin narrative strung together with some songs. Like it's kind of antiquated now where they'd make a movie to kind of coincide with an album. And Prince really wanted to do that, and that's why this movie kind of exists.
The most recent example, this might be contentious, but I feel that way about the movie, and it's also a play, a Broadway show, Once, which I think is...
Kinda. Yeah,
Yes.
I guess that's kind of true. Yeah,
Yeah.
Okay. I think that's probably fair. But in any case, like, when you think of, like, this one, I brought up Hard Day's Night because I think it's Hard Day's Night was the Beatles still kind of young and kind of kids, so they more or less were aware of how silly this could be and become and have fun with it. Whereas this movie is kind of mired in its own self-importance. Like, even Prince's performance is sort of like the
Very
whole mystique is that it's
and-
Prince, like he just kind of stands there and glares at you for most of the movie.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's funny because it's the movie that I would say is very much propped up by his charisma, for better or worse. Like, it's one of those things, like, if you like Prince, you're probably going to be okay and like this movie. If you're not into Prince, this will be a quizzical, strange experience. I am somewhere in the middle. I had a fantastic time with this, but I can't tell you it's a good movie. It's super strange.
I was more or less kind of waiting for it to be over. Because I'm not really all that familiar with Prince, I'm gonna be honest. But what I am familiar with, not that much of a fan of. But what I will say is I understand the appeal. I really do. I mean, how could you complain about a guy who moves like James Brown but plays like Jimi Hendrix? He's no doubt a creative fountain. Just never been my bag. So,
yeah.
I don't really get them. And now, if you'd replace this movie and done the same movie with, like, David Bowie or something like that, I'm not sure if I would like it any better either. I'm also not a fan of these sort of, like, musician biographies, because it's, again, a lot of it is sort of mired in this sort of, like, self-importance.
I mean, I'll give you that.
When the guy's, like, behind it, like, I always kind of feel like, well, this is more or less like a vanity project. And in the case of Prince, who's so theatric, this was just more of like him trying to build up the mystique of Prince, basically. And it worked. Yeah. I mean, it obviously worked. It was huge success. Like massive success. The album, the movie, like everything worked. Warner Brothers couldn't be happier.
Yeah. I'm also not the biggest, like, Prince aficionado. I don't follow Prince super clearly. I've never been the biggest fan of Prince. I know some of the big ones. I know, Strawberry Beret and Purple Rain and When Doves Cry and The Kiss. And that's about it. Yeah, stuff like that.
Yeah.
And also, it's worth noting, this man has put out a metric fuck ton of music. He puts out so many goddamn albums.
And it's dwarfed only by what hasn't even been released yet. And when he died, like, he's got a whole vault of stuff that's just, like, sitting there.
I heard about that one, but I would have expected something to come out by now. That's the thing.
It's a lot of it. I mean, it depends on how well he kept up to it. I mean, it was the same thing. Zappa's stuff was kept in a vault forever. And a lot of it is like fight with the heirs, apparently. A lot of it gets mixed up with like the rights of who owns the stuff, the estate, the probate shit. I certainly know that's what happened with Zappa, and I suspect something similar is happening with Prince. So that's probably why. But one of these days it'll happen. Once the shrapnel stops getting thrown around, somebody's gonna go through and like give the Peter Jackson treatment to it for sure.
Oh, I obviously also know, relating to our previous episode, his work on the Batman 1989 soundtrack.
Well, it's funny. I did a little research just because I'm a dork.
Trust and Bat Dance and all that stuff.
The Squawk. You saw the Joker do it.
Mm-hmm. Oh my god. I watched the Bat Dance video too. It's very strange. So this movie is kind of there was something funny about this because it triggered me to go out and do research into Prince, because I actually didn't know much about Prince. My wife saw this shirt in Target and knew that we were watching this, so forced me to get it.
God bless you, Sarah.
Yeah,
one of the good ones. Right on.
I'm now going to be wearing this to work and probably confusing my coworkers who are all Zoomers and don't understand who Prince is. Anyway, so the weird thing with this is Prince and the Minneapolis sound. Do you guys know anything about this? Or is he as confusing and strange to you guys as he was to me?
I know
he's
know
huge
a huge
in
deal
Minneapolis.
About
I know he's huge in
I know
Minneapolis.
he lived there. He had a big estate there. I think he died there. Like, he was a Minneapolis
legend. Yeah.
So here's the weird thing I found out about why the Minneapolis music scene occurred when it did. The surrounding area around Minneapolis is predominantly, I believe, Pennsylvania Dutch. It was a lot of German immigrants. And when they moved in, they all had a love for their culture that they didn't want to give up. So in the midst of this group, in a subsection, right around the center of town, there was a black population. And when the Germans came in, it was, the same sort of thing you have with most places where it's an uneven social strata. However, the Germans decided that they desperately wanted to maintain polka. They were losing their folk roots in polka. So what they did is they gave every child free musical training all through grade school and free instruments and the whole thing, and covered it. So what that essentially did is that a lot of these poorer people wound up getting really top-tier educations in music, and it turned into a much larger musical scene. However, it also caused this weird mash-em-up between styles, because all of the African-American musicians started having to play music that they could actually make money with, which meant polka, calypsos, things like that they were learning and practicing so that they could make the white audiences they were often playing for happy. However, it led to a strange sort of grouping of things, where it turned into things like Morris Day and the Time. It turned into Prince. I believe there was, Janet Jackson's big songs. Some of those borrowed from the same sound from the Minneapolis area, which is just surprising to me, because I didn't know anything about this and I'd never really been part of it. But it was, I think, kind of a more exciting thing for me in the research end of it to go, oh, so this is why Prince was kind of a big deal to people. Also because his music was so kind of out of left field for what everybody else was doing at the time. Anyway, that's me getting up off my soapbox.
No, that's really interesting. Yeah. I find that because I also, given the sort of Germanic roots to it, you got to think like bands like Kraftwerk too, even like contemporary bands from, at the time, West Germany. Like it you got to think that played a lot into it too, with like the Moog synthesizers and stuff like that. Because a lot of Prince's sort of style, and you can really see it in this movie and in the soundtracks especially, that like he does try to do what Little Richard did to rock and roll and kind of be a contributor to that, but he was doing it with like the 80s kind of synth sound, and performing like James Brown. And the guy, again, I cannot stress this enough, the guy is amazing on the guitar. I mean, the solo at the end of Purple Rain is amazing. And if you don't believe me, there's one YouTube clip that you can go out there and watch. It's from the George Harrison inductment ceremony, and the concert is it's the remaining Woolberries sans Bob Dylan doing While My Guitar Gently Weeps, and Prince does the Clapton solo at the end of the song, and he rocks it. I mean, he knocks it out of the park. It is definitely worth your time to watch him. And there's a slew of great guitar players up there, but he just demolishes them. He's amazing. I cannot say enough about it. Again, not my taste, but I get why he's so talented. But I love hearing that's my bag when it comes to like music history and stuff. I love learning, especially like geography and where that you kind of get a sense of. But that's my problem with this movie. I didn't get that sense. I didn't get that sense of anything where Prince is coming from. And that's where I kind of think this movie's a bit of a cheat, because it's meant to be sort of biographical, but yet we're really shielding. I never got a sense of who the kid is. I don't know who he is other than Prince. Like that's who I know him as. And so it doesn't really do much to lift the veil out of it. What you were describing is far. I would much rather see a meaty documentary about Prince than his own accounting of what he wants Prince to be. Yeah,
I'd agree. Like, that probably would have been more interesting. However, this is just kind of what he decided to do in a strange way. Like this one often, you mentioned another film that it reminded you of. For me, it reminded me of 8 Mile a little bit.
Yeah. Oh, for sure.
Weird
8
as that
Mile
sounds.
cribs from this a lot.
Like, it's almost the same storyline. There's like, the lover's tension, the rival musician,
you could even go back
all of it.
Like the previous decade with Neil Diamond's Jazz Singer. you know, a little bit. I mean, it's not quite autobiographical, but and it's a remake of the Al Jolson movie, kind of. They go every other way to kind of distance themselves from that, but it is kind of the same kind of story, isn't it? Like Neil Diamond is trying to like make sense of his own past and his own culture with the dreams of him being what he intends to be. Another not great movie, you know, gotta say that right there. You know, another not great movie. But you know, that's why I don't really like these movies. They're all the same. Like, they're all the fucking same.
Yeah, that's true.
True, but this one, you do have the joyful confusion of a film that purports to show Prince as a hard man. Who's a hard life living man.
But here's what I mean, like, he was, by all reports, there's Sinead O'Connor kind of came out about the recording sessions of Nothing Compares to You working with Prince and what kind of a living nightmare it was. You know, and I can't imagine that that's the only story that's out there about Prince. Like, apparently the way he treated the bandmates in the movie is sort of how he treated the bandmates in real life.
Okay, I feel like this movie a little bit. There are aspects of this movie that like belie a bad tendency, perhaps. I think like there is. I mean, it's a vanity project, and like parts of it would make Tommy Wiseau proud. Like the sex scenes are very gratuitous, and it's like very intense. And I imagine they were written that way and filmed that way very intentionally. The relationship to abuse is complicated at the very minimum.
Yeah, it's kind of apologetic to a degree. There aren't really hard consequences for slapping someone.
It's mostly like in both cases, it's like the father ultimately is revealed. Like he finds, I forgot to mention, he finds all of his compositions after he attempts suicide. So they were actually written down somewhere, but which doesn't really go anywhere. But it happens. It also isn't revealed which band is cut. That is not revealed.
Yeah, the film ends on just
come on.
I mean, it just ends on them jamming, right? Like, there isn't really a denouement. It's just like, all right, some stuff goes on.
No, he
jamming.
gets up and gets his guitar squirt gun, and you know,
right?
I don't even think they show the Modern Airs performance in the final.
Yeah, they don't even show Apollonia's band.
Don't they do Sex Shooter?
They do, but not for the competition. It's like when the
okay.
competition gets announced.
Yeah.
Well, this one, it's funny. That's another funny thing about this, because Vanity was supposed to be in this movie, but then she dropped out of like the princedom. So it went from Vanity 5 to Apollonia 6, because I guess you have to add one to make it better. But
as I understand it, Morris Day and Prince never spoke after this movie either.
That wouldn't surprise me.
Yeah.
But it seems super strange to me, like, how they approached women on this film. Like there was not a lot of agency there. And, like, the behind-the-scenes stuff, like, I really have to wonder, like, how uncomfortable it was for the women involved with Prince. Because I know he had, like, 3 girlfriends at one point. He's been connected with a bunch of women, but he's also very talented, so you have to wonder how much pressure there was to do that. It makes the sex scenes with Apollonia a little cringy.
And they're very intense.
Yeah.
Like, they spend time, like, with a lot of groping and touching on every part of her body very intently. And those scenes last, like, a good minute and a half.
Prince is never that naked.
Yeah, that's
weird.
True. But I'll also note, she's definitely, like, in front of him, and he is just absolutely going to town. But I do think the way that domestic violence is portrayed in some regards, like, he gets angry at his father and then, like, sees this troubled genius aspect and calms down about it. Like, that's consistently as portrayed. And I think Prince's character is supposed to have that same thing, and like, oh, we're trying to veer away, like, I'm trying to manage my great genius because if I don't manage it correctly, it'll come out as violence. And it's like, what is this message, Prince? What are you fucking talking about?
I mean, it's just like he's musically hangry. That's all that's going on.
Well, and that's why, I mean, like, I think it should be noted that, like, there are most of the actors in this movie are not professional actors. Apollonia, I think, was, like, in, you know, TV movies and shit like that. But most of them are just musicians. Like, Lisa and Wendy are just, they're musicians. And Morris Day and the Time are just Morris Day and the Time. And apparently they made them go to acting classes. So, like, they meant to take a couple of classes. But I think it does go to show you that acting's hard. You know, like, just because you're a genius at one thing doesn't make you a genius at the other. But to Prince's credit, his performance as an actor, not as, you know, the rock star or whatever. That scene where he's contemplating his own suicide, I thought was an actual real moment, and I felt like he was actually kind of getting there. I'll give him that, where I did kind of feel that he was getting some truth there, which was cool. But other than that, he's really just kind of glaring at everybody most of the time. They give him not a lot of dialogue. He doesn't really say a lot. I mean, that Morris Day and the Time Abbott and Costello ripoff took more words than I think the totality of what the kid ever says.
I'd say that Morris Day might have more charisma in some ways than Prince, but he didn't have good lines.
Well, I think that Morris Day had a better drug dealer and had more time in the trailer with the goofballs, if you know what I'm saying.
Probably.
And that's, you know, so, like, you know, I'm not saying that none of them took this seriously. I mean, Prince, you could tell, was taking it pretty seriously. But that's the problem, is you're taking this kind of the fact that you're taking this seriously is a bit troubling to me. And, you know, you getting your snowed up Morris Day to be like the humorous kind of foible, and one of the things he does is literally throw a woman in a dumpster, and that we're supposed to he has a
little lackey named Jerome who does whatever he says. Like, he can't roll his window down and Jerome has to do it, or a woman harangues him on the street for sleeping with her and then he didn't call her back and they throw her in a dumpster or something like that. Or he wants to get he tips a woman at the club and then tells Jerome to get his tip back. But most notably, a scene that is very fully just it's just the Abbott and Costello who's on first routine.
Yep.
Like, blatant ripoff, I would say.
Yep.
Yeah, the password is what? Yep.
Once I realized and it didn't take long to realize, oh my God, this is what we're doing. We're really getting to the bottom of the barrel here. That's why I'm gonna go make some coffee. This is gonna be a while.
I almost, to be honest, I wondered in that scene if it wasn't like based off like some of the vaudevillian stuff that they would have been doing, like, as banter.
Well, sure.
Just because of the Germans and the. I know it's Abbott and Costello, but the German, like, group around it, having that in context, I was sitting there wondering, like, is this just bad writing, or is this like someone was like, hey, we always do this bit during a thing, let's just fill some space? I don't know.
Well, I'll say this about that bit conceptually. Like, obviously, like Russell said, like, it's bottom of the barrel. Like, to be clear, the original Who's on First bit is one of the greatest comedy bits ever written. Like, it holds up today, it will hold up forever. Like, in 1,000 years, when they're like the most famous comedy bits, like, there'll be something from Shakespeare and there'll be Abbott and Costello's Who's on First. Like, they'll still be like, this was revolutionary stuff. Obviously, Who's on First is a lot more involved than What's the Password, because it goes on to have third base and second base and shortstop and all this other shit. But it's just a weak and very, very, you know, it's somebody who's a fan of Abbott and Costello in whatever time period this is, being like, and they're 14 and they're like, I'm going to do my own version of it. And it's just the same bit.
That's right.
But not as good, not as thorough. There's not as many twists.
Yeah.
And they just, like, write it in an afternoon, or like, this is my version. And it's like, well, you understand. I understand. Like, a 14-year-old could be forgiven because they don't get it. But, like, it's you didn't do anything new. You just rewrote it worse.
Right. Yeah. I completely agree with you, Zach. There's a reason why this joke keeps getting recycled, is because it, for the most part, works. It's a all reliable. And that's where it I don't know. It just felt that they were like, they can do this because basically you just say one word, Morris. It's no problem. So yeah, I didn't particularly enjoy this movie, and I think, Zach, you're very apt to kind of notice a not very subtle through line of a very complicated relationship to violence towards women. But I also think, Prince's music and his whole persona is, and a lot of the 80s pop music was sex sells. I mean, it was
That's
overly sexualized, so I don't know if we're kind of looking at this in a prism kind of like that, but I don't think, not to excuse it, but I do wonder how much that played into it.
And there's two things to think about. One, I don't know much. Like I said, I don't know Prince super well. A lot of the songs in this were like his A-game songs.
I guess.
At least a handful of them. And then also, well, we have to consider we got three not super shiny rocks on this particular expedition. We did not find the gem in the rough. We didn't find it. I mean,
Yeah, true.
we might like one more than the other, but
But I mean, okay, but I think that comparing even the last two movies to this movie, unlike the last two movies, I mean, this movie is heralded as a classic. Like, people,
I was surprised.
This movie is very much heralded as like one
This
of the
one
greatest
has
rock movies ever.
much better Rotten Tomatoes score than the previous two movies we watched, and I don't know if I think it deserves almost double the acclaim of either of those two movies.
Yeah, that's something that I would agree with. It's super strange that it hit such a cultural chord. Like, I remember being a child when this came out, and I remember it was brutalized by critics. Like, they were not being cutesy about it. If I remember correctly, like, that was one of my first, like, memories as a child of, like, paying attention to reviews when things came out, was just that people hated Purple Rain so much. But I was able to buy it on a t-shirt at Target years later.
Let me ask you this, Chris. Can I ask you? And this could apply to. This might apply to Batman Forever for some people too, but it must be much less pronounced if it is the case. I don't think it applies to Judgment Night at all, which I think is roundly forgotten, except for the soundtrack. Do you think this is one of those movies like Space Jam? Many people would argue The Goonies or Hocus Pocus.
Ghostbusters.
Now for Gen Z, it seems like the 2000 Scooby-Doo movie is an example of this. A movie that is honestly pretty fucking, and I would agree with you. Ghostbusters is good, not great, and I think Gen X thinks it's fucking great. It's fine. Yeah, is this a nostalgia movie? Is this a movie that is burning the fumes of nostalgia and has not much else going for it?
That could be. Yeah, I mean, I think that's probably absolutely correct. I mean, the thing is that the album is incredibly solid. So it's one of these weird things where the tertiary media to the movie, sort of the whole point of this whole run, has really, I think, elevated the original movie in a way that it didn't totally deserve.
I think that's right. I think I think this movie is experienced more as a fan of Prince than anything else. It's again sort of Hard Day's Night. If you don't like the Beatles, that movie's not that charming, but at least it's shorter and they're at least funny about it,
Mm-hmm.
Russell has opened a real can of worms with this topic because obviously this is a topic where part of the thing that's based into the premise is like the movie can only be so good. The soundtrack at least has to be better. So the movie can theoretically be good if the soundtrack's great. But this is a real can of worms for the movie trap, because going forward, like what's the logical conclusion? It's like, try to lose. The topic for this is try to lose.
Well, it's also like you have to ask, because like as we go through it, like I'm gonna throw a clip at the front of this because they were interviewing people on MTV when this film came out. In 2 days, it is the 38th anniversary of when this film premiered at the Grauman's Chinese Theater. I have footage of it. I'm gonna throw it on the front of this because they interview a couple people that just knew this was gonna be a mess. And you could see them trying their best, except for Eddie Murphy, who just happily says, "This movie's gonna be a mess. Have fun." It's one of these things where what do we consider good? Like what about this is the winner? Are we going to consider the fact that Batman Forever was a complete story and was fairly entertaining when we watched it, versus this movie, which was entertaining when they were performing music?
And yeah, there was some good music. I mean, there was individual moments that were effective in this movie. Judgment Night is also a complete story technically. Like
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. I don't know, man. I mean, I guess it's up to us, the voters. You know.
Yeah, exactly. It's individual
who am I to
preference,
judge
right?
about as far as your metric is concerned? But what I will say, Borf, I do think this movie is a bit of a cheat, but I'll allow it. But here's what I will say. Normally, when I conceived of this theme, I was thinking of movie soundtracks that will prop up the movie, and it seems like this was the other way around. This movie was kind of made to prop up the album, and it was much more synergy. Now, I do think that's more of a product of the 80s, where everything was synergy was so new, and Warner Brothers had just acquired like this whole thing, so they were kind of in the music thing as well, so they wanted to consolidate as much as they could and cross market as much as they could. And for this is a shining example of how it could work. I mean, because then they had it on MTV, they had it on home movies, you know, they had the album, so like they got to really get their beaks wet on this, and it caused a breakup between Prince and Warner Brothers. That's why he changed his name to the artist least formerly known as Prince, and the rest is pretty much history. So that's why I'll allow it, but this is not necessarily what I had in mind, because, you know, like, you can go kind of, you know, because, like, I don't remember if there was an Eminem 8 Mile album that was coming around with it. There was 1 or 2 songs that were coming out on his album when that movie came out, but I don't think a whole album, that movie wasn't made to push an album. If anything, there was an album made to push the movie. So that's where I'm a little shaky ground on this one, but I will totally allow it.
Yeah, I couldn't figure out if this was really incorporating the music either, because when I asked you guys about it originally, you guys had seen it before I hadn't. I was wondering, like, is this just
I've never
a
seen this
musical?
before.
Oh, you
I've never
haven't?
seen it.
Okay.
Oh, I have seen it before, and I remember why I mostly forgot it and just remembered the songs.
Yeah, well, that was the weird thing, because when I was watching the movie, I was like, it didn't really incorporate many of the songs into the actual action of what was happening, outside of When Doves Cry, which I guess is now about him abusing Apollonia. But yeah, that was a very strange... Everything about this movie is very strange and hard to comprehend. It's also been remade.
What?
Oh,
yeah. I
Yeah.
didn't it remade, and the title is something pretty funny.
Yeah, it was the color Rain the Color of Blue with a little bit of red in it. It's a Nigerian it's a Nigerian language film. It's essentially the same movie. It's just a ripoff. But sorry, to get back to the point I was making, because I got off the track. With the musical sequences, they feel documentary style, and it feels like the movie's story kind of stops, because it just goes into this scene where they're playing and, you know, performing. It almost felt like the ABBA movie. If you guys probably haven't seen that, but there was a movie about ABBA.
Oh, are you talking
you
about
seen it?
Mamma Mia or Mamma Mia Here We Go Again?
No. I'm talking about
That's the
ABBA.
musical with ABBA.
Yeah. No, this is the ABBA film that came out concurrent with the ABBA music back when. They didn't have a story. It was just a news reporter who was trying to interview ABBA and him having misadventures, intercut with him going to different ABBA concerts where they'd be up on stage singing. And then I think the movie ends with him accidentally being in the elevator with ABBA, and they don't have a line of dialogue in the whole thing. It's just this dumbass running around and excuses to show the performance. But
is that where Spinal Tap kind of got their inspiration from? Because that kind of reminds me of Spinal Tap. That's why, when you're doing, I like I said earlier, I'd much rather see a Prince documentary, even if it is just like that. I think that would be more interesting to watch, because it felt like it wanted to be a documentary, but it also wanted to be stylized and stuff. And like the weird montages that it kind of goes through, which is fine. I don't have a problem with it. It just seems like, we're just looking for an excuse just to get somebody on stage and sing a song. And that can work. That can work if the movie's fun. Like if you think of like the Blues Brothers and shit like that, like that's pretty much what that movie is. They're just jumping from one next song to the other. But it's fun and everybody's having, it's more or less, there's no like rapturous melodrama going on where it's this character kind of opining to be or not to be, what have you. Like I just kind of, it first of all, I don't believe it. I just don't buy it. I mean, I'm sure that Prince has had many dark nights of the soul, but I just don't think it happened that way. And I feel like you're adding more weight to an already great song. Like you didn't need to have the dad thing to have Purple Rain be a good song. Purple Rain's it's a fine song as is, but it like gave him a motivation just to be absolutely emotional about it, which you could just be emotional when you're singing the song and nobody's going to say boo. You can just do that.
Yeah. I don't know if I have much more I can say about this other than that. Like, I think we're kind of at final thoughts, unless you guys want to say something
the problem
else.
is, like a good percentage of this runtime is either a music video or a film stage performance. So how much... At a certain point, you run out of things to say because it's not a full-length movie.
Not really a movie, right? I don't have anything to go on. I don't really, the
if it were
backstory
if you cut the songs out, the plot threads, many of them would not resolve at all. They would just end.
Mm-hmm.
Sure. Yeah, no, and that's why like I'll go first because I'm gonna blabber it on and on about it. But I think that like when you think about movies like this. And even using like non-actors, like I thought of
wait. Give me one moment before you start. Because we've got a run of 3 not so great movies, I'm gonna give a point to each of you two for bearing out this little slog. One to both of you.
I don't think I deserve it, Zach, because it was my idea. It was my idea for the race to the bottom.
No, this is this is actually in some ways what this podcast was designed for. And you're the first person to utilize it properly.
Okay, well, and you did make me watch Batman Forever, so you know what? I'm gonna give you a point for that because you definitely kept with the trend of deep hurting. Okay, so
I'm gonna give you a point too. Screw it, let's do it.
Right. Yes.
You got a point from me, Zach.
Okay, all right.
Specifically for applying the theme of the series to this.
And it's appropriately so. Okay, so I'll go with my final thoughts because I'm going to go on and on about it. But yeah, I think all that you guys said is true. Like, it's a thin narrative that really is just an excuse to jump from one music scene to another and then to fill up enough reels to justify a theatrical release. Which I think was the whole point for Prince and Warner Brothers in general. So, and especially when, I haven't seen this really done all that well, ever. 8 Mile was actually not bad. Like, that was actually okay for what it was. But
I still think that Once is this.
Okay.
Because it's a singular artist or pair of artists. And it's highly acclaimed. And it even bothered me in that movie. But I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt your final thoughts.
No, and I think that's why I don't even mind using non-actors. But then just don't have it just be Prince then. Like just maybe have Prince try to do something else other than just be him fuck himself. But then again, if you're going to cast Prince, why would you have him be anything else? So, because you can think about other movies that have non-actors, even in the 80s, and even that just center around musicians playing, like, basically themselves. It happened all the time. So I just don't know if it justifies a whole movie about it. Now, that being said, do I think the soundtrack is better than the movie? I think it fucking has to be, because that's most of the movie. If you didn't think the soundtrack was all that good, you're really not gonna like the movie. And I at least, for not being a big Prince fan, it's fine if you're into that kind of thing. So yeah, thanks, Borif. Appreciate it.
So I'll just kind of, I can just jump on the grenade real quick. So, this movie didn't live up to my expectations. I enjoyed it for how weird it was. I don't think it had enough meat on that bone to keep me coming back ever again. But it is a strange use of his star power. I think a better use of star power of a musician has to be The Man Who Fell to Earth. Because David Bowie doing his alien thing was in that. It even had an album that came out connected with that movie when David Bowie, I guess in a coked up bender, thought that he was supposed to make the soundtrack for The Man Who Fell to Earth. So he had this completely strange concept album come out called, I think, The Stranger or something like that, where it's all just completely instrumental pieces that should have been used in the soundtrack, he thought, but no one asked for it, and when he gave it to that director, he said no. Anyway, this film also led to Prince making multiple other feature-length films that I've never heard of. He made 6 other films, like Graffiti Bridge, and Under the Penny Moon, or some other purple... There was a purple moon, or something like that. Anyway, for me, I'm going to say that if you like the movie, listen to the soundtrack. If you're someone who likes the soundtrack, don't see the movie.
You got the movie. It's already there.
That's it.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's my piece on this.
Yeah, this is half of a movie. The last 15 full minutes are just Prince performing on stage. Like instead of like really resolving a plot, it's just like Prince is great. Now he's gonna do 2 encores. Yeah, like truly, that's it. That's the like, and I don't know, like, and many aspects of it have aged poorly. Not only because they were never like narratively satisfying, but because I think as time goes by, like they are culturally a little weirder than they probably were in the 80s. So, if you like Purple Rain, God bless you. You're probably about 50 years old. You probably saw it in the theater. I can't take that away from you. You're gonna like. I like some shit too, man. I like some shit that came out when I was 6 years old. And that's fine. Everybody's entitled to that and allowed to do that. Don't let us three, being Grinches about this movie take that away from you, because whatever, you're entitled to things that remind you of your childhood.
Absolutely. We are not here to yuck your yum.
But,
and if Prince is your yum, then...
But also, I would recommend you, like us, I mean, at least me, I know the ones that I like that are like, this isn't actually that great. I just liked it because I saw it at the right time. Mm-hmm. So maybe a little introspection and be like, yeah, maybe this one's only works if you were who I was, where I was when I saw it. And yeah.
You get that inoculation period,
Yeah, you have to be Kevin Smith. That's what you're saying.
That's right.
Yeah, right.
Which is my first real exposure to Purple Rain, because I think it's in Mallrats. It opens with Jay and Silent Bob doing the Jungle Love from Morris Day and the Time. That's where I got my first introduction to Purple Rain. I knew of Prince, but I didn't really give a shit. And hey, here I am today. But yeah, I kind of agree with the cultural mores, because it reminded me of this old MST3K riff where when Prince slaps Apollonia, I immediately thought of our hero, ladies and gentlemen. Just sort of like, great.
And it's supposed to be a parallel to the dad, and he doesn't want to do it. But blah, 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 blah. He's still shitty to her all the rest of the time.
Right. And to his bandmates, and to pretty much anybody, because he's just like, all he does is like stare at you, and I guess we're just supposed to divine what he's thinking, whatever.
There was one really fun moment with one of the band members, though. He leans back and gives her a kiss on the cheek when they're doing Purple Rain.
And that face
and she
that
looks
she
like
gives.
she is gonna take a shit.
Yes, I'm glad
she
you
is
mentioned
so
that.
unhappy.
Yeah. Oh my. Like she looks like she's like, I'm gonna punch this guy.
Those two, Lisa and Wendy, did leave the band a couple years later.
Yeah.
Can understand.
Yeah. I think they were even featured on the Scream soundtrack, I think, or something like that. I don't know. Anyway,
they wrote soundtracks for a few movies. I can't remember which ones, but
well, and they clearly are the creative force behind Purple Rain. I'm surprised Prince gave that up. I mean, that just doesn't sound like Prince is all.
There is an interview I can send to you guys of the band talking about making this movie years later, and I think, of course, it's after Prince has passed away.
Oh, really?
But
okay.
they go into that a little bit, talking about how intense it was. They talk about how weird it was that they forced everyone to go through doing rehearsals. I think Morris Day was the only person who was fucking around too much, and Prince was like, no, you can't fuck around. And then Morris Day just didn't show up to the rest of those rehearsals and never had a problem. Also, the most fun in the movie. He just seemed like he was having fun, even though his character was a monster.
Yes, that's true. It helps to be snowed up in the trailer. Alrighty. Well, gentlemen.
Morris Day, he wanted to get with Apollonia, but all he did was, like, hold his coat open from 7 feet away and be like, hey, I'm dancing. Like, he wasn't really, it was pretty mild compared to some of the shit the kid did.
Yes. There's a lot of showing, not growing in this movie, I've noticed. That's like, you never see Prince really that naked. You never see Morris Day very close to women. I'm thinking it might be all for show. That's what I'm thinking. They might not know how to handle women if they actually were real people as opposed to the two-dimensional characters being slapped. Anyway.
Let's leave this theme behind and
yes, indeed.
Yes.
Gentlemen, I appreciate your enthusiasm for this theme, but let's get this out of the way, shall we? Because pray to God that I don't win this shit. Because yes, I do not want a 3-peat. This is not. I don't want it. Okay, so before we get writing our scores down, let me get a final total because we were all so generous. Our points came down like Purple Rain at the end of this. So, Chris Borup, you have 13 points for final voting. I myself have 11 points for final voting, and Zach Powers, the point monster, strikes again with 15 points for final voting. So, with that in mind, we'll do the Jeopardy noise and write down our scores, and we'll go from there.
This is kind of hard. This is difficult.
It's kind of hard, yeah, because they all
I think there's a clear winner myself.
Okay.
I think there's a very clear winner.
I think you might be right. Oh, God. Chris Borup, what do you got for Judgment Night?
I am going to give Judgment Night a 2. And it was simply because it wasn't quite my jam.
I get it. I also gave Judgment Night a 2, although the soundtrack rocks. That movie is not fun to watch, and it should be on the waste heap of culture where it belongs. Zach Powers, what do you got for Judgment?
I had more points than you, mind you, but I gave it a 4.
Okay. That's true. Mr. Moneybags over there. Alrighty. So that gives Judgment Night an 8. Okay, so Chris Borup, what do you got for Batman Forever? Are you going to give it a kiss from a rose?
I will. I'm going to give Batman Forever an 8.
Wow.
Because I think it is a better film. I'm wearing the t-shirt. I appreciate the art. It is a much better film.
Okay. Well, I gave Batman Forever a 4, and that is merely because of the movies it was up against. And for what it's worth, I guess it's still fun to, dress around as Batman and go beat up bad guys. So there's that. All right, Zach, what do you got for Batman Forever?
Batman Forever gets a 7 from me. It is a movie with some sense of identity, some character. It is, among these, a movie I will remember and has uniqueness, in my opinion. So there you go.
Fair enough. All right. So Batman Forever is the movie to beat with a whopping 19
And hey, nostalgia
points.
nerds for Purple Rain. Maybe Batman Forever benefited from that.
Yeah, there you go. And, anyway. Okay, Chris Boroff, Mr. Superfan of Purple Rain over there, what do you got?
I'm going to give Superfan a 3 for Purple Rain. Of course, I've had to write the word purple out because it's a black Sharpie.
Okay. I gave Purple Rain a 4, I guess, just for the, Prince matters, I suppose. So they tell me, and smarter people than me would say so I guess I'll go with that.
I gave Purple Rain a 4. Also, I made a little Prince symbol. It's angry. Unfortunately,
Yeah.
I think that sort of a sound is about all you have to say.
Yeah, pretty much how I felt throughout it, except for the one moment where I'm with you, Borf. I audibly laughed out loud when I saw that kiss to Lisa or whatever. All right, so that is it. We are done. Russell's streak is over. Zach Powers has the floor. Zach Powers, what are you trapping us with?
I was thinking long and hard these past few weeks about possible themes, and I've done some weird ones. I've done like the city one or like significant others, and I've gone all astray. And I was thinking about the early days of the podcast where we were just making themes about shit that was going on at the time, and I kind of want to just go back to basics. And these next episodes are going to come out in August, early September. Fuck it. This is Dog Days of Summer. Let's make it. That's it. That's the fucking theme. Movies about the dog days of summer. Nothing too complex. Gives you some variety. Let's make it simple and quick. And I'm going to start with a movie that I watch pretty regularly. Most years, not every year, around this time. It's Wet Hot American Summer.
Okay, alrighty.
All right.
Okay, nice. Okay, I'm not gonna lie, Zach. I came prepared this time with like a theme in mind, but I was racking my brain like I can't win 3 times in a row. There's no way. But I was literally thinking heat wave because it's so goddamn hot out here. So,
Absolutely
like,
applies.
right,
So there you go.
All right.
We've been going through the heat here in Chicago too, and obviously in the UK, all over the globe, because the world is slowly dying, of course.
Yeah, France is on fire.
Yeah, but don't worry, our best and our brightest are all over it, guys.
But we're going to start it out lighthearted. You guys can go wherever you want with this theme.
Sweet.
But I'm going to start it out with a little bit of levity. We don't do enough comedy on this show, generally speaking.
Very true. And this one's a classic.
Yeah. So,
Yeah. Can we? Is there any option on this show to ask for one film not to get played?
I don't think so. Where the fuck can you get off on?
Well, then.
This is not the moody dictatorship here, Buster. We can
Well,
pick whatever
okay.
we want.
Okay, I understand. This is a thoroughly American podcast.
So if I choose
let you-
Crash, you're just going to sit there and take your goddamn vegetables. I hate to sit Batman Forever, okay? I don't want to hear it.
I
But
just
you
think-
gave the most points of the 3
Yes.
movies we watched.
I tied it with Purple Rain.
I just want to say that I think what we've learned from this is that Batman Forever can be redeemed.
That's true.
It came back and won.
No, this is
one,
the
after
appropriate
hating
course
it
of
that
action.
time.
Batman Forever made this. Without Batman Forever, we would not be recording this podcast right now. And it deserves this way. The first time I recorded with you two, we talked about Batman Forever, and that is... It deserves to take its place among the stars.
It is now in the great Hall of Fame of movie trap winners. Batman Forever, you did it. 8-year-old Russell is very pissed off. Okay, well, I'm excited for the heat for the long dog days of summer. Let's go. Let's crank up those ACs to full because it's 1,000 degrees out there, and yeah. Alrighty, so with that in mind, it's been a pleasure as always. Do join us next time where we'll be watching Wet Hot American Summer, and it'll be a lot of fun. So with that, I have been Russell Carlson, and I have been joined by Chris Boroff.
Let me give you a tip, Junior. Your music only makes sense to you.
Profound. I have also been joined by my good buddy, Zach Powers.
Hallelujah Squawk, or whatever the fucking...
Okay. Have a good time, everybody. And as we always say here, Diane Ladd is too young to play Chevy Chase's mom.
It's the movie Trap Promise.
It's true. See you guys.
Everybody came to see Purple Rain tonight at the famous Mann's Chinese Theater on Hollywood Boulevard. Here's how it looked.
I'm just so thankful to Prince, the good Lord, and every single person out there. Thank you very, very much.
Is there something in particular you're looking forward to in this film tonight?
I've heard there's some violence and some nudity, which I'm not a big fan of, but if it's a part of his true story, then I think so be it.
Is there something in the immediate future, perhaps with Fleetwood Mac, that you would like to mention? What's going through your mind right now?
I want to see the movie, and then I want to see some lovely young ladies, so y'all hang around, okay?